Okay, good morning, everyone, or should I say good evening? I expect it's evening for most people dialed in here. Thank you for joining us. My name is Amy Major. I'm MBA Recruitment Manager here at the Business School, and for the past 3 years have been responsible for attracting folk like yourself from 11,000 miles away to come to the MBA. So we're really sort of hosting this webinar for you to get to hear perspectives from our current students, really so that you can get some insights from people that are experiencing this firsthand, and quite scarily coming to sort of, you know, the end of the experience, which feels very bittersweet. It's I think every year of the MBA goes faster and faster. This webinar also works as a nice precursor for our information events that we are currently confirming in Sydney and Melbourne for August. So we will be partnering with our alumni based in those cities to host 2 informational events. They'll be hosted by my colleague Samantha White, our MBA Marketing Recruitment Manager, also fellow Australian, whose partner is currently studying a DPhil here at Oxford. So she has some, you know, great insights from the sort of programme side, but also from, you know, experiencing life in Oxford, which is obviously integral to your experience both at the business school and in the university. But enough of me speaking. I think it's you know, we're here for you to hear from the current students. So you hopefully can see on the screen 4 people. Slight change of agenda in that Alice sadly couldn't join us, but we are also joined by James Sully, so you'll hear his voice but not see his face. But so, you know, perhaps we could, you know, we're all sat in a room here, so just to, it's quite drizzly outside, probably the only time of the year where our weather slightly mirrors that of Sydney and Australia, but I'm sure another couple of months and it will be different. I've not got agreement there, so, but perhaps we could go around the table and perhaps you could, you know, all introduce yourselves, give a flavour of sort of, you know, what you were doing pre-MBA. Maybe you could say which college you're in. I'm sure we'll come on to the college experience a little bit more. And perhaps just anything that's sort of interesting that you might like to share.
Great, I'll start then. So my name's Bede. I was at PwC in the Melbourne office before coming over here. I've actually completed 2 programs, well, soon to finish my second. First program that I started in Oxford, essentially as part of the 1+1, was global governance and diplomacy. So fortunately, I've been able to absorb most of what Oxford has to offer over the past 2 years. Next steps for me, I'm looking to intern, well, I will be interning at BCG in the Sydney office as part of the internship for credit capstone course that you can do here. And then post internship, my pathway is still very open, but most likely to go back into consulting and hopefully BCG converts into something. My college's first program, I was in St Anthony's, and I'm one of the fortunate few who was able to change colleges after their first year of study. So this year I'm now at Exeter. So I'm more than happy to share insights into both what it might be like to do dual programs in Oxford, having had 2 college experiences, speak to that, and then more interest in the program as well if you have some.
Great, thanks, Pete. So I'm William. I'm an engineer from New Zealand. I've kind of lived and worked around the world, so US, London. Prior to the MBA, I was working in London, and I got in 2017, and I went back. I was on the waiting list, and went back to New Zealand to save up. So future going forward, my plan is to go back to New Zealand and get into agribusiness. And the college I'm in is Pembroke College. You'll get advice about different colleges. They're very similar, but I guess after you've been here, I would recommend some colleges over others, and Pembroke College is a really great college for the experience. I guess I could talk about, if you're interested, about not having a financial or business background and coming into the MBA. So if you're interested in that, then fire through your questions.
Yeah. I'm Jared from the Central Coast, which is a little bit north of Sydney. And before the MBA, I was at Deloitte. So I spent 4 years in Sydney and then 2.5 years in the London office. I'm at Teddy Hall here in Oxford, and I've done a whole host of things whilst I've been at the university. My plan post MBA is, so I've founded a company that's in agritech, and I'm going to continue to pursue that after the program. And if you want, I can talk about things like how being at Oxford whilst setting up and building the company has helped me, and also probably the other things that I've been involved in whilst I've been here. Also, my way of getting to Oxford was a little bit different in that my wife did the program 3 years ago, so I had 6 weeks in between contract at Deloitte where I was just kind of getting around the program and doing all the fun stuff with none of the responsibility, which was amazing. But yeah, I can talk to you guys about all that stuff if you want to hear about it.
Cheers, mate. So, hey guys, my name's James. I'm from Brisbane. Bit of a weird background. I did sort of commerce economics at university, but I started a healthcare tech company in Australia when I was a bit younger, about 20. Sort of grew that for 6 years and then sort of rolled that into another company, and we listed down in Sydney. Then did a bit of pet tech, and sort of the year before I was in the MBA, I was over in Silicon Valley working with a startup over there, which is basically trying to create population health and better outcomes for Americans. So I came in sort of looking for a new challenge or a bit of a change, which the MBA has been terrific for, and you meet tons of great people. My college is Mansfield, which is a solid one, which I picked. I'd love to say I picked for more noble reasons, but I picked because it was right in the centre. And I wanted the full Oxford experience. But echoing Willie, picking your college well, I think is quite important for your experience here. They're all very different. And post MBA, I'm looking at staying in London at the moment, probably in a consulting role in innovations, technology, or healthcare tech.
Great. So Alice actually is with us. So I'm going to turn over to Alice now. Hopefully we can hear her coming in. No, we can't. Okay. We can't quite hear her. So bear with me.
Hi, can you hear me?
You can. The text works. Yes. Come on.
Excellent. Hi. Sorry, guys. I'm calling in from France, but my name is Alice Truswell, and I am from Sydney, and was working in strategy before I came here, specifically digital strategy at the Commonwealth Bank. And before that, I was in consulting. The reason that I chose to embark on the MBA was that it was a pretty, rocky time at my company, as Australians, I'm sure you know. And I was wanting to think about leadership in a different way and gain more perspectives from an outside point of view. And Oxford was perfect for that, I thought, because of the diversity of the cohort, which has certainly been proven. I go to Balliol College and I love it. I do think that your college choice is important, but I think what's more important is how involved you get in it. Any college can be fantastic if you throw yourself in. And it's really easy to do that. They set it up for you to do that. So I think that's really important. After the MBA, I want to work in fintech in London. So continuing on in the financial services industry, but perhaps a more customer-centric role. That's me.
Thank you, Alice, for dialing in from France. And for anybody listening, I guess you're wondering why is Alice dialing in from France? I think, we really wanted to have, a female from this region representing. And as much as our MBA cohort is currently 39% women, not 39 in number, looking to be around 42 to 43% this coming September based on the numbers. Alice, I believe, is our only Australian female.
Only Antipodean. Only female Antipodean. Yes.
Yeah. So we do, however, have 4 women from the Australasia region coming in this year. So we have improved that, but it is one of the regions from which we do see a very male-dominated community. So any women on here who are considering coming to the program, we would really welcome you. I'm saying this in a room of 4 strong MBA men. So but thank you, Alice, for dialing in from your trip in France. So I think, you know, what came out for me there is you obviously talked about sort of the college experience. I think, you know, what you can't get from our website is that there's the curriculum of the program, and then there is everything else that sort of bolts onto that. So, you know, we might term it co-curriculars. So I don't know, perhaps you could give a bit of a flavour of, you know, outside of those core courses and the electives and all of the group assignments and the group projects, what kind of things have you got involved in, from maybe, you know, everything from sort of clubs, groups, Oxford Business Networks, the union, sports, college, what has filled the rest of your time around that, really? So, yeah.
Want me to kick off?
Yeah.
So one thing you'll find about Oxford is your sport for choice, and the hardest thing is to allocate time across all the interests that you might want to pursue. So outside of class, I've had a few things on. I've been working with a friend on a startup called Policy. Well, it's not really a startup anymore. It's 3 years old. And I sort of came on board a year and a half ago. So in the last 6 months, for example, we launched in Belgium. That's consumed a lot of my time. Beyond that, more academic focused, I've been a part of a group here called OxPeace, which is a cross-discipline group that looks at the study of peace and the further of peace. So typically people focus on like, what are the causes of war, and how do you bring resolutions to conflict areas? Whereas the focus of that group is looking at what are the preemptive factors that you can develop in societies across the world to prevent those sorts of things. So for me, that's a really great interest area that I absolutely throw myself into. Rather, it's very different from my studies in the MBA program, but it's a nice way to explore other interest areas. And, you know, that's just one example of the many sort of groups, committees that you can get involved in whilst in Oxford. Other things include, say, sports. College sports are very big here. I by no means dedicate the time to actually do well in them, but I get out there and have fun with some guys, which is great. And then, yeah, the union was mentioned. The union's fantastic. The caliber of speakers that come through is just incredible. There's debates through to presentations, and you'll find that sometimes you can learn more through a 1 hour union talk than you might in an entire day of class. And so I absolutely encourage people to make the most of those sorts of extracurricular opportunities. It's really worth the while.
Cool, yeah. I'd kind of echo those comments that, you know, Stefano made a good point at the beginning. He was like, it's like drinking water from a fire hose at Oxford. There's just so much you can do. So Alice made a good point as well, that you should really try to get involved in your colleges as much as possible. Some are quite active in their activities, the Graduate Society organisers called MCR. For me personally, I've been kind of recruited for the rowing. I'm quite tall, so the first day I showed up there, they pulled me into the boat. But that's been an absolutely amazing experience. I kind of worked my way up and got to know some people outside the MBA who were doing PhDs and physics and medicine and all this type of stuff. So I really encourage to get involved in these kind of communities outside the MBA and get to know other people.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I did what feels like 100 things outside of the MBA program. So beyond setting up my company, I was also rowing for Teddy Hall as well, which is good fun on the water quite early in the morning. It's not 4 a.m. start, so the nightmare stories that you hear, it's quite civilized. It's more like 7 or something like that. But it's absolutely gorgeous, like first thing in the morning on the water, you know, sun's coming up. It's fantastic. I was also I was a co-chair of the Tech OBN this year, which allowed me to do several other things, like also organizing the Silicon Valley track. So we went out and we saw rocket manufacturing out at SpaceX. We had a factory tour at Tesla as well. We're in Google, Facebook. That was chief strategy and ops guys. We were in the brand new Apple Parkway as well, and a couple other companies. So we're able to organize that. I'm quite heavily involved at the Foundry. If you don't know what that is, it's a kind of a lightning rod for everything entrepreneurial that's going on in Oxford at the moment. So if you're interested, you can try and get on the student advisory board there, and you can try and help organize events for them. I think I helped them co-wrote an AI and ethics competition that we ended up having, which was around, I think we ended up basing it around recruitment, right? And the part that artificial intelligence plays in that. And there's just heaps of scope for you to go out and just meet lots of interesting people. So I'd just go to random dinners at Teddy Hall, which is Cinnamon Hall, if they're just getting the lingo down, and you meet just incredible people doing amazing things. Like some of the DPhils I met in material sciences are inventing things like spray-on solar cells and new outer coatings to go on the outside of vehicles re-entering the atmosphere. So you'll just meet truly talented and inspiring individuals if you take the time to go out there and meet them. And there's also plenty of opportunity to do things outside of that, just off your own back as well. So you can just organize whatever you really want to do. So yeah, heaps of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I echo each of these guys. One of the things when we were talking about, he was talking about time allocation, and as a sort of juxtaposition to these guys, one of my things I want to try and do here was try out some of the blue sports if I could. And so I played a game for the rugby team, and then I ended up making, luckily, the golf team. But that in itself took 3 days a week out of my schedule for 6 months. So as B said, I mean, that gave me a lot of FOMO. But if you do allocate your time well, you can still go out and experience, so I went to a lot of union talks first. To echo B's point, had one of the great union talks last week, which was Billy Joel in the union. He brought his piano and told us stories and played a couple of songs. So that's the type of stuff that can happen there. We had once again another half. It was Jon Stewart, Dave Chappelle, and they just basically phones down and talked about life and their experience. It was amazing. So I won't go over what everyone else said, but I echo it. And I also say, just on the college side again, we all sort of can joke about different colleges and that type of thing, but Mansfield for me, whilst it's a happy accident, it was an accident on the selection. It's also basically, I found out one of the great colleges as far as inclusiveness, and one of the highest intakes of sort of public school kids here. So, and I met some terrific individuals there. So I don't think you can really go wrong either. So I'll say that, not to scare you from my first comments.
Alice, anything to add?
Yeah. So I've tried to get involved in a lot of things as well, which Oxford definitely encourages, and as you can hear from the others. So I decided never to do rowing when I went to Oxford. So obviously started rowing in the first week when I got there, and I did that for 2 terms, and that was incredible for meeting people in my college and also feeling a healthy stress release. I also have been trying to involve myself in other things in the graduate community of the college. So I live on site, and I'm quite heavily involved in organising things like the upcoming annual garden party that we're holding. And I do some casual kind of business mentoring with people in the MCR because I don't know how many resumes I've looked at, for instance, but people are really grateful because if they've come from a purely academic background, they often don't have the same lens for viewing things, and now they're looking for their first job out of uni and don't really know how to approach it. Then in terms of stuff at the business school, probably my biggest co-curricular activity this year has been the Oxford Seed Fund, which has been incredible. It's a small fund, and 11 of us are directors from the MBA cohort every year. You interview, and then you get to do the whole process from taking applications, doing due diligence, listening to entrepreneur pitches, and then deciding who to invest in, doing the term sheets, etc. But it also has involved meeting with venture capital companies in London and all sorts of different entrepreneurs. And through that, I also was judging the Oxford entrepreneurship competition, which was at the Foundry, which was a lot of fun. I've also been involved with the Skoll Centre, which is the Social Impact Centre, and their awards program, doing the applications and the due diligence and the shortlisting for that, which was really fascinating. Some new businesses really trying to tackle interesting social problems. And then going to the union when I can, absolutely. A couple of weeks ago, I debated at the union, which was good fun. And then just odds and ends, like I had an interview on the Future of Business podcast a few months ago and that kind of thing. So there's lots to sink your teeth into.
Excellent, great. Gosh, you've all been very, very busy people. So thank you for coming this morning. So, if you cast, your sort of mind back, and I think, certainly, Jared, we first met in Sydney in 2016, and obviously, Willie, this has been, a longer sort of journey for you. And Bede, we were talking some time ago, and James, we haven't met before, but it's great to have you here. And Alice, I first met in Sydney at the BCG offices at an event probably 2 years ago. So, cast your mind back before, all of this felt very normal, and having this 24-hour day in Oxford. Is there any advice you would give to somebody, at the point of probably, still considering the programme, the location, and really the prep that's involved in getting, towards the MBA and making it a reality? Alice, would you like to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. So I guess the first thing would be that if you are considering it and you feel like the timing is right, and you're really curious about it, I would say just apply and go for it. I was in two minds about doing it. I think we all are. It's a really big decision, and it can be quite stressful to be making that decision, because you ask the people around you and they all tell you different things, and MBAs in Australia are not necessarily as common as they are in, for instance, the US. So sometimes people are saying, oh, why would you consider that? And other times people are saying, come on, you're never going to regret a year at Oxford. So I would say just go for it, just apply. It's also a really good process for getting your thoughts in order about what you want for your future. And I think that the biggest hurdle for me was the GMAT, which was not fun, but it's not as scary as I thought it was going to be actually in the end. But it just takes some time management to be able to study for that while you're also working or whatever. But you can definitely make it happen. I thought I couldn't, and it was totally fine in the end. Advice I would give would be to think about the reasons why you're doing it as well. So for me, it was wanting to get global perspectives, wanting to meet a whole lot of new people, and also wanting a pause from my career. I felt like everything that I had done to date had kind of just been almost taking opportunities as they come, rather than being strategic in where I actually wanted to be. This year's been completely fundamental for that. So all of my expectations and the things that I wanted have been exceeded, like above and beyond. But I had a business undergrad degree, so the classes themselves haven't necessarily until this term added a whole lot more than that. It meant that I could focus on other things, which I really appreciated. But yeah, just think about why you're doing it, and that will help set you up for assessing whether you think you're going to be able to meet those expectations through this course.
Thank you.
I won't waste anyone's time. I echo everything Alice said. I think that's terrific advice. Basically, once again, I echo the fact that it allowed me to take a breath. I was on a specific career path, which sort of just happened, and it wasn't something that I chose. It's just something that I did, which I'm very happy about. But this gives me a chance to take a breath. Well, a busy breath, but a breath nonetheless, and actually explore lots and lots of different things, which is one of the really unique things about Oxford. I will also echo for Alice, the scariest thing for me initially was the GMAT, but the reality is, you can do it, we all did, and basically you just put your head down and give it a shot. Most of the people here are working while doing it, and we all sort of came through, and there are lots of resources for that if that's something you haven't done or are thinking about. But those are two main things I think about.
Yeah, no, I echo Alice's advice as well. I mean, I came in like quite structured because my wife had done the program before, and because I hung around the 2015-16 MBA cohort quite a bit, so I kind of knew what I was getting into, and I had that perspective. Like everything was kind of nicely quantified. I knew what I was getting myself into before I came into the program. So I came in with quite a definitive plan about exactly what I wanted to get out of this year. And for me, this was about having the freedom to start my company and the resources and leverage that being in a university like Oxford provides. But also, for whatever, 90% of startups fail, and there's no guarantee that my company will be a success. So should everything just go kaput, at the end of the day, I've got an MBA from Oxford, and I should be able to land on my feet somewhere. So there's a whole host of things to consider. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I'll be brief. I mean, I agree with everyone said here. Just a point on Alice made on the courses not really adding value. I think if you don't have a business background, there's quite a range in skills and abilities in the class. So some people really struggled for like simple, accounting, business, finance. So what I found very valuable was I actually did Wall Street prep before coming in to the MBA, and actually did CFA level 1, just to get a feel for business and if I enjoyed it and if I can pick it up. So I'd recommend that. And just one thing I kind of wish I did differently is coming into the MBA, I noticed a couple of people did treks like Silicon Valley to get to know people, and I think that was like the people who went on that treks got to know each other quite well, and you kind of hit the ground running in the MBA.
Too well.
So I'd recommend trying to get to know the people from Australia and New Zealand before you get going.
Yeah, not much else to add, but just to share my experiences with the GMAT or GRE, that was definitely the hardest part for me. I sat that at the same time as my final exams for my previous degree. I just had a bad snowboarding accident only a couple of months before. I was out of my sling for just a couple of weeks before I sat the exam. And I was by no means prepared, by no means did as well as I would have liked to, but the school were understanding of that, and just keeping contact with Amy throughout that process was really helpful. So, even if you don't feel as though you're as prepared or as best placed as you could be, still give it a crack. And you'd be surprised to learn just how supportive the recruitment staff here are, and understanding your circumstances. For me, I didn't have like a finance or an accounting background. Even though I worked in consulting, I was essentially in public sector and public policy. So it was a humanities-based skill set that I brought to that role. So I approached the MBA with a very clear interest in disrupting that skill set and sort of picking up the skills that I wasn't encountering all that clearly in my previous projects at work. So for me, the MBA was a nice next step to get the skills and experiences that I needed as a bit of a foundation to then develop on in the workplace. So I've learned a lot from all the programs, and I think Wall Street Prep as well, if I could do something differently. Wall Street Prep is, just in case you're not aware, it's a sort of like a educational resource online. They've got a variety of subjects that you can explore, and it's very structured. You'll get access to that before you arrive in Oxford, I think several months before you arrive. And I definitely recommend looking through that if there's a particular area of concern, if it be accounting or finance. The programs there will get you in incredible shape, and the subjects, once you enter them, will be far easier if you do that prep work in advance.
Excellent, thank you. I would say at this point, if you want to start sending through any questions, we'll obviously come on to those. Probably have a couple more questions for the panel, and then we'll turn to the audience. Perhaps just to give a little bit of context to a couple of things people have mentioned there. Obviously, this is about getting insights from the current students, but we have just set the application deadlines for next year, so I thought it would be remiss not to share those. They will be published on the website shortly. So we have 4 application deadlines for 2020 entry to the programme, and they will be the 6th of September, the 1st of November, the 10th of January, and the 3rd of April. So just to give a little bit more context, again, we've had a lot of comments about colleges, that being an important part of your experience, and maybe, getting acceptance to the college of your choice. So I just thought I'd touch on how that system works. At the point of your offer to the programme, and at the point that you then select that you're going to choose to come here and pay your deposit, you are allowed to select one college. I don't want to make 2 analogies to recent films and books, but it is a little bit like the Sorting Hat, and may or may not choose you, at which point you crudely go into what is called automatic allocation. However, I would say if you are if you have applied in one of the earlier application rounds, we will do our absolute best to try and get you a place in somewhere that is probably similar or along the lines of the preferences that we know you have. However, if you are a last round applicant, your chance and choice is going to be very slim. So all of the people here on the webinar today, I would say, are in great colleges and probably have made some really educated choices, and we recommend that you do your research, speak to alumni, speak to current MBAs, and speak to us in recruitment admissions to get our advice based on your profile on where might be interesting for you and where you have the greatest chance of gaining admission. So there's lots more. We could talk about colleges for probably a couple of hours on here and still have loads more info to share, but just really wanted to give a little bit of context to that for anybody who isn't familiar with the system. We just have Alice on mute and we're just unmuting her again. So the tech's continuing to work, so that's good. I think, we talked about sort of the pre-MBA piece. I've been out to certainly sort of Australia hosting events the last 3 years, and something that I often get the question of is, well, there's business schools in Australia. Obviously, maybe you'd have a wider kind of local network if you stayed there. Is it worth, literally moving to the other side of the world? Clearly there's options outside of the UK as well, US schools and many other great schools in Europe. We realise it's a hugely competitive landscape out there, but perhaps you could just share a couple of points of what really sort of brought you to coming here to Said. So
just on that last point when you're talking about around networks. So I have extreme, probably the smartest person I know. He did his MBA at Melbourne. And we've been in touch consistently throughout this process. And one of the things that he, this is anecdotal, but he basically said, look, he wishes he was doing what I was doing because he's now got a job at BCG Boston. So when we're talking about networks, it's also good to have scope around when you're doing your MBA, you might end up in London or Boston or Australia or Singapore afterwards. And the global network that Oxford creates, I think, can't really be underestimated. So that's just a point I thought I quickly make after those comments, because speaking anecdotally with a couple of people who did do local MBAs, and that was something I was thinking about. That is some comments that I've received, and in my experience, I wouldn't change a thing.
Also echoing that on network. I mean, the way I organised the Silicon Valley track this year was through Oxford alumni that were working in San Francisco and the Bay Area. I mean, it's amazing just how helpful these people are and how responsive they are to you trying to organise or do something. I mean, one of the great examples of that is that there's no Oxford alumni in the corporate development team in Apple, but they're all Stanford MBAs, right? But we ended up getting in there and having lunch with them because one of the Oxford MBAs from 3 years ago was a roommate at Stanford with one of the people that is now working at Apple. So she put me in contact with them, having, you know what I mean? Like, it's like 3 degrees of separation, but they were more than happy to help facilitate that kind of meetup so we could try and make something happen. And that's how useful and helpful the Oxford MBA network is globally. There's also just the fact that Oxford is a globally recognized institution, and if you are planning on going to the US post MBA, Oxford is one of those places in Europe that does raise the eyebrows in the United States. So they'll go, oh yeah, Oxford, great, I know where that is. So it's it is good, yeah.
Yeah, I think that you get a lot more diverse class as well from Oxford versus Australia and New Zealand. And also the quality of people, you've got Rhodes Scholars, you've got, all these, we've got one here in the room today. And you've got, as I mentioned before, you've got DPhils and you've got access to Oxford University. And as Jared rightly pointed out, you get access to all these companies by just mentioning you're from Oxford. For example, we were in Israel for a student trek last week, and Sir Ronald Cohen, one of the godfathers of venture capital, agreed to meet with us for half an hour. And I don't think that could really, it'd be hard. Well, I think it'd be hard for different universities.
Yeah, I think why Oxford? I mean, Oxford's a pretty small city. It's probably only around 100,000 people, but and the university is definitely, the university brings the strongest presence to the city, I'd say. So what that means is that you exist in a very small and connected space where it's very easy to make friends because it's extremely international. And the benefit of that is that you can choose the kind of experience that you want to have. You can either embed yourself within the business community and develop your friendships and networks in that space, or if you so choose, you can absolutely open yourself up to meeting people from a diversity of backgrounds with a diversity of interests, skill sets, and career prospects. So, just to further that networking element, the sort of people and people you can be introduced to in Oxford, I imagine, would be very different to the types of experiences you might have, say, in a larger city where it's more decentralized. You don't necessarily see the same, same sorts of people that you want to see every day. We're in that sort of dispersed environment. Highly intellectual bubble, I think that's great. And then Oxford, part of the business school benefits is that you can just walk 5 minutes up the road to the union and sit in on all those sorts of extracurricular things. So everything's close, accessible, and absolutely worth making the most of.
Alice, over to you.
Yeah, I think you only have to look at the union term card to see the kind of people that Oxford draws, which I suggest you do online. But you use the Oxford brand and people are drawn to that. I mean, it's the best university in the world, and so you can definitely leverage that. And there are actually a lot of Australians who have gone through the program. So I'm connected to the Oxford Business Alumni Network in Australia. It's a WhatsApp group that's pretty active. It's got about 85 participants, and everyone's trying to help one another out. And that's just the business alum. So there are a whole lot more Oxford alum in Australia. But I've reflected on this quite a lot, and what I think about local versus international is that while my friends in Sydney are incredible, love them to death, and really smart, ambitious people, they didn't necessarily challenge my views like the people in Oxford have, because we grew up in similar types of situations and have heard similar narratives throughout our lives growing up in Australia. Whereas the people in Oxford, both at the business school and outside the business school, have these perspectives where they're saying, no, that's not the only way of looking at this issue actually, and have you considered this? And no, that's not a fact, that's an assumption. And those sorts of things that have definitely developed my thinking and have also developed my confidence in being able to talk about why I think what I think. And so I think you're not going to get that if you go to a business school instead of a university. I think it would be a real shame to not have that cross-discipline exposure, and I don't think you're going to get that at a local university either. So whether it's Oxford or elsewhere, obviously I'd recommend Oxford, but look for a business school within a university, and look for one where you're going to be intellectually challenged, because if you leave this year without feeling challenged, firstly, I don't know how you could, and secondly, you haven't made the most of what you could do.
Thank you. So maybe if we turn to the audience, we've got a couple of questions which may be sort of relevant to some of the comments just made. So question here, what is the 1-year MBA like, and did you consider a 2-year program, for example, in the US? So, certainly I'll get questions globally around that kind of 1 year versus the 2-year. Would anybody have any comments there?
Yeah, I previously,
No, you go for it, Alice.
Okay. I didn't actually think very much about it when I applied. I thought 1 year was perfect because I didn't want to take too long out of my career. I already worried that taking 1 year was kind of like, oh, is this a bit self-indulgent? So I didn't want to take 2. I still think it's probably good to only do 1 year in business school. It is drinking from a fire hose, but I also think that you need that intensity to grow as much as you want to. What I would have considered more had I thought more about it was the 1+1 program, which I know Bede can speak to. I think the idea of if you can take 2 years, that's definitely what I would have done. So you can get the 2 master's programs, one after the other. So that could have been great, because now the year's almost up and it's like, oh, that went so fast. I could definitely do with another year here.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, taking 2 years out of the, like, what's the world going to look like in your industry 2 years away is pretty hard. Like, you know, even just deciding what that's going to look like a year away is pretty hard to tell, let alone 2. And also, if you've got a pretty good idea about what you want to do after the MBA, then you don't necessarily need 2 years off to go and get that. You can knock over the MBA in 9 months if you really want to. I mean, I front-loaded not everybody can do that, but I front-loaded the degree and I'm actually done in 2 weeks' time. So I don't have any summer electives or internships or anything. I'm done and dusted, which is why my schedule looks the way it does at the moment. But I mean, if you've got a pretty good idea about what you want to do when you're in your MBA program, makes sense. If you don't, it forces you to kind of crystallize what you want to do, because if you did a 2-year, you might spend a year kind of faffing about and just getting, you know, not really doing too much, and then you'd focus for the final year on actually making those networks and all that kind of stuff. Whereas if you're serious about what you want to do, the 1-year program will just kind of, yeah, force you to concentrate and focus in on what matters to you.
And absolutely agree. Anecdotally, on my side, did the quick back of the envelope, you know, math on opportunity costs, and long story short, it didn't make sense for me. I wanted to explore what I didn't know, and I think I have done that. There's a huge part of me that wants this to continue. It's the best year of my life, but there's another part of me that wants to get back and get stuck into some more work. And you'll still be able to do a lot of the things that you can do in a 2-year MBA. But to echo Jared's point, I think there will be X amount of time that is probably a bit more, I'm not going to say wasted, but you don't need to do the things that probably, in my opinion, you want to do. If it's travel, that type of stuff, I've done a ton of travel this year as well. So I think as much as I love this experience to continue, 1 year is probably a solid amount of time to do it.
Anything else to add, or
No, I don't have anything to add.
Okay.
I was going to say, Dean Tufano, he's written an article on this, so if you Google that, his kind of argument is you spend a year and that money you could spend in the next year, spread that over 10 years, and you could get much more value out of that. So I recommend looking that up.
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth looking at this as the long-term investment. It's not what you're going to get, you know, the job that you're going to get immediately, that, you know, September or October, November after you finish the course. It's that next, you know, 5, 10, 15 years really. So
yeah, the other thing I just thought of is that kind of process of exploration doesn't really stop when the MBA does. I mean, I was catching up with MBAs from a couple of years ago, 2 weeks ago in London, and everybody's either an entrepreneur, a consultant in banking or private equity or something like that, but they've swapped after the MBA program is finished into a new industry that they wanted to explore, and they were able to do that because of the network they had because of the MBA program that they'd just done. So it facilitated that exploration post MBA as well.
And coming on to the London piece, somebody's said here, you know, for people who aren't returning to Australia and New Zealand immediately, you know, do you feel that London is a better platform to elevate the career immediately post MBA? And perhaps, do you have plans to move back home in the medium / long term?
Well, so my plans are, this is James here, sorry guys. My plans are to stay around. I did not plan to do that before I got here. I was in the States and was probably going to come back to Australia. I was thinking we have a pretty great place, but through my time here, through the networks I've created, and through the great alumni network I have here, I'm actually going to stick around for at least the foreseeable future, because I think that's probably the right thing to do. But I was absolutely exploring coming back as my number one option before I got here. So that did change my mind.
Yeah, for me, I mean, my wife and I's initial plan was she would do the MBA program, I would do my 2 years on my Tier 5 Youth Mobility visa, and then we'd both go back to Sydney and just kind of continue where we'd left off. And her program changed both our minds in terms of we would prefer to stay in London for the next few years at the very least. And then it convinced me to do the MBA here as well. So, I mean, I think London post MBA, definitely you'll get paid better than you did in Sydney. You'll be able to travel further. It'll take you less time to get to new countries, I'll put it that way. But yeah, no, I think London's a great option post MBA.
I'm also looking at London. I'm interviewing at the moment for a firm that's headquartered in London, but I've actually just decided that I'd rather go to New York than London, more for personal reasons. London's a great place, but studying in Oxford won't limit your ability to go elsewhere in the world. It's such an international university with connections all around the world that your prospects aren't limited by any means. So even if you're unsure about where you want to end up, coming here will enable you to talk to prospective recruiting teams from various industries from various parts of the world, and you can build that understanding as you're here.
Great.
Yeah, I would like to be in fintech after the MBA, and London is basically the global capital of fintech. So I think that that's where I want to be, at least for the short term. But I would like to end up in Australia for kind of having a family and everything. I can't imagine a better place than there, but I think that having some time in London will be very well regarded in my future in Australia. So that I think is a really solid investment.
Okay, we've had a couple of comments obviously from a couple of you around the seed fund, working on startups. Somebody here just interested to learn a little bit more about the entrepreneurship opportunities. It's probably a longer conversation, but any other comments that you would share around how you get involved with those, perhaps be it the Oxford Foundry or any of the co-curriculars that have assisted you with that during the course.
I think
Alice, would you like to? I think the line's dropped off for her. Jared, is there anything you wanted to add? Or?
Right. So the question was seed fund, co-curriculars, Oxford Foundry.
Yeah, or how would you use those resources? I know you sort of were already working on your business before you came here, but.
I think I did pitch to the Oxford Seed Fund, but I wasn't victorious, unfortunately. But I do make great use of the Oxford Foundry and what they've got on offer. So they've got an absolutely incredible network that you can lean on, and they're also a place where the entrepreneurial activities across the university are distilled because of the college system at Oxford. There's a lot of different silos around the place where bits and pieces of stuff is happening, and if you're just kind of reaching out by yourself, it can be difficult to kind of understand exactly what's going on and what the groups are and what they offer and all that stuff. So going through the Oxford Foundry has allowed me to find particularly talented individuals that either I can use as an advisor or people that can facilitate another introduction for me in terms of investors. So we have been funded since my company, but a lot of that legwork came out of my engagement with the Oxford Foundry, and Johnny, who does the outreach out there, is a really great guy. So get in contact with him if you end up coming in.
Excellent. I think we've got Alice back. Alice, we had somebody who was just interested to hear a little bit more about the seed fund opportunities. Perhaps if you'd have a couple of comments there.
Yeah, of course. So the seed fund, they generally pick a managing director and two sort of deputy managing directors before the MBA starts, and then normally people that the program organisers have found that are already in that industry. But they then interview the rest of the class who who are interested. So you find out about it in the first couple of weeks of Michaelmas. You submit an application of why you're interested, and then you have an interview with these 3 from your cohort who have already been selected. Then there are I think 8 of us that get chosen, and because they've already selected those 3 that have a bit more of a background in it, they're looking for as much diversity as possible for the rest. So even split of gender, making sure that people have come from different industries, different key skill sets. So people from education, law, financial services, consulting. There's a range of us. And then the actual program goes for the full year. The most work is probably in Hillary. The time commitment then might be a few hours a week, but actually it's probably a few hours a week for the whole year, and maybe a few more in Hillary, but it's definitely worth it. I knew nothing about venture capital. I didn't know what venture capital was when I joined the MBA, as embarrassing as that is. I hadn't heard of a seed fund, so they certainly didn't take me for my deep finance expertise, but because of that, I wanted to learn about it, and it has been an incredible learning opportunity. And from having gone in here thinking there's no way really that I want to start something or be an entrepreneur or be at an early stage company, now I'm actually thinking the opposite because of the seed fund experience. I think I know a lot more about the journey of what founders go through and what it takes, how to build a good pitch, how to appeal to investors, how to approach investors. So it's been an incredibly useful experience, and it's also been very fun and social. It's a great group of people. People will pull their weight, which is awesome. It's been incredible.
Excellent. Okay, we've got 3 last questions and about 7 minutes left. So someone's saying, thanks for the great discussion. Can you please talk to the use of case studies on the programme?
It's not as case heavy as, say, Harvard. Harvard, you'll probably cover, I think it's a couple of 100 cases across the time there. We don't really cover.
Depends on the classes.
Yeah, it depends on the classes. Yeah. So we do have case studies for most of our classes. I wouldn't say it's the core focus of those classes though. Like sometimes we can spend just 20, if maybe half an hour discussing a case. But the learning experience here is driven by other elements. Is that sort of fair to say?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else to add, or should we move to the...
No, I mean, it depends, on the course you take. Private equity, mergers and acquisitions, those would be more case heavy. Same things like entrepreneurial finance. If you do the finance lab, which I did, which I absolutely recommend, it's good fun. Well, fun's not the operative word. If by fun you mean work, then yes, pick it up. But it's if you do or do not have a background in finance, it's worth your time. But in those classes, you'll do a lot of casework. In other ones, not so much. They'll be a little bit more on the reading side. Yeah.
Excellent. Somebody here just wanting to know how long it took you to prepare your application and which round did you apply in? So,
It took me a week, and I applied in the last round at the last second.
It took me about a week as well to put my stuff in order, and I applied in the second round.
It took me about 2 months just to get my references in order, and then to study for the GMAT. So, but yeah, putting all the documents together, you can do it on a weekend potentially. And I applied in the last round. I recommend applying.
Don't does.
Similar timing. I prepared for the interview probably across a 2-week period. That was, just like an hour or so each day thinking through why I wanted to do the program, what my sort of responses might be. But in terms of gathering the material and putting together the actual submittable application, that doesn't take very long.
Alice, anything?
For me, the longest part was the GMAT, which took, I guess, a couple of months to study for. The actual, the rest probably about a week. I applied in round 2, I think it's really important to apply earlier for two reasons. Firstly, I think that's when most, there are scholarships that are given out throughout the year, and Amy can talk to this better than I can, but my understanding was that there's some that are only given up until the end of round 2, and so I think that's important. The second thing that I think is important is the colleges to get in early. So if you don't really mind which college to go to, and that is totally fine, then I don't think it matters so much. But if you, I really wanted my college, and I think if I'd applied any later, there wouldn't have been a way for me to get in there. So the places of the best colleges do fill up, because a lot of the older colleges don't accept many MBAs, and so that's why I think applying earlier is better. I also think it gives you more time to think it over and like prepare emotionally, mentally. Yeah.
Thank you, Alice. Perhaps just one more question before we just close off. Could you speak to any sort of leadership development sort of courses or programs or general opportunities that you found through the course?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much scope for you to just kind of pick up your own thing and run with it. I mean, I worked with the conferences team, and one of the things I did whilst I was here was I organised negotiation masterclass workshop for the kids over at the Ruskin Art School, because they finish their master's programs and then they're out in the world, and a lot of the time young artists are exploited or work for free for many years. So I conducted a skills workshop for them, taught them how to negotiate from a position of perceived weakness. And so there's plenty of stuff that you can do. If there's not a structured program for you to do it with, you can always come up with an idea and approach the school and say, could we organize something that does this?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I'm trying to wrap my brain. There's so many different things. I mean, the school runs a few of them. Your colleges can run a few of them. You guys, if you have a specific passion, can run your own. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's right. Courses, yes, there are classes that, I mean, there's one, Leadership in the Humanities, which takes a cross-discipline approach to understanding what leadership is, how to look at it. It's a theme embedded throughout the MBA. So it's the Oxford Business School, or SBS, pitches itself as developing bright and capable, but particularly responsible business leaders for the future. So it's a theme you'll always encounter, specific courses that address that content. Then there are other opportunities through the Oxford Business Network, so the OBN, through the business school. There are various sort of industries that are represented within that network, and you can, say, apply to head one of those networks. Alice has already spoken about the leadership opportunities with the Seed Fund. There are just several extracurricular opportunities to pursue that, and as James said, you can either do that through formal business school things, university-wide committees, or college-specific opportunities. So, yeah.
Okay, well, we're just coming up to time. I think Alice maybe just has one more thing to add. Just bear with me.
Yes, sorry. In terms of the leadership program, I think what is most important about the MBA that I realized was that it's not about looking at leadership as separate, like a separate topic to anything else. I mean, I do the Leadership Perspectives of the Humanities course, and it is incredible. It's so interesting. But you realize that the opportunities to show leadership when you see something that you want to fix, and so you go and fix it, or you see someone struggling and so you go and help them because you know the topic more than they do, or you're in your group assignments, and there are a lot of group assignments, and you have to step up and lead a difficult situation. And it's those times when I was best able to reflect on the leader that I had been of a team at work versus the leader that I wanted to be, and where my key strengths were, and also where the things that I needed to develop were. And so you're practicing leadership all the time. But just like everything else with the MBA, it is what you make it. So if you are looking for opportunities to improve your leadership, then you need to stare into it and be willing to accept that what you see is not always going to be pretty, and that you want to work on those things and make them stronger. I think that it's undeniable that the Oxford MBA has done that for me and improved my confidence with leadership hugely. But yeah, don't go in expecting it to be a separate kind of stream of work. The work on leadership is going to be you making the most of the leadership opportunities that you're given through the course to actually improve your leadership style.
I think we've got a last bean of inspiration here from Bede as well.
I don't know about inspiring, but one last thing to add. So there's also an opportunity to get like one-on-one personalized coaching through the MBA. So you do have to apply for it. You have to sort of outline why it is that you want coaching, and the coaching could be for any reason you choose. They'll match you with an appropriate person for that. And they're typically people outside the business school that have networks in Oxford. And so I know people have specifically focused on developing their leadership skills through those coaching experiences. And that coaching relationship takes place across the year, and you schedule meetings as appropriate for your specific interest areas and needs. So yeah, that's just like one example of the sort of support that you can access through the business school to develop an interest area, be it leadership or something else, which is, I think, really great.
Thank you. So with that, just a couple of closing comments from me. So a couple of people asked about whether we would be in Australia. Maybe a few people missed the beginning. We will be in Sydney and Melbourne during week commencing the 12th of August. So we'll be hosting 2 information events that we'll be partnering with the alumni chapters in Sydney and Melbourne. So likely to have panels of alumni from across sort of the last few years. So not just people who've just finished the programme, but maybe people who are a few years out from their experience and really starting to see the sort of, you know, the value of that investment. As mentioned at the beginning, I'm the MBA recruitment manager for this region, so I'm happy to have Skype calls or conversations or exchange emails. I always think a Skype call is best to sort of, you know, bring things to life as opposed to exchanging a very long email trail. So I will share my email address in the chat box here so you can see that. Also, just a point of note for next year's applications, I mentioned the deadline. We also have one significant change to the application in that we're moving to a video assessment. So this will, for the most part, replace the essay, current written essay elements. I recommend that you download the brochure for the MBA. Make sure you tick yes to receiving mailings from us, and then you will receive any updates regarding the application changes for this year. So the application system will open as of the 1st of August. We will have webinars, and we'll have all the information online regards the new video assessment tool, but we think this is a great development. It's something being used by many schools internationally now, and will give you, you know, the chance to sort of, you know, interact with us, not just on paper, you know, for your application. So we think it's a great addition to the process, particularly for those of you that maybe can't get over here to interview with us in person. So do look out for all of that information. I'm just going to send my email address now to you. I'm happy to chat at any time with you and arrange Skype calls as appropriate. So, but thank you to our panel for joining us this morning.
Good job, team.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all of you. I'm sure it's quite late for most of you now. And with that, hope that you hope this is just the beginning of your journey to maybe an Oxford MBA. So thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye. Bye.
Is it state of origin, so? Has to be.